Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 14.7.1 was released to the public this past week, along with iOS 15 Beta 4 that came out to developers and public beta testers. And I want to talk about the overall experience based on the devices we have here, as well as your experience based off the YouTube community poll, where there are over 20,000 votes and hundreds of comments talking about your general experience on both versions. So I wanted to cover some of that. Now, before we get started, I did want to record this outside in HDR like I have for the past couple of weeks, but it's just super hot. It's 88 degrees, it's fairly humid, and it's supposed to get even warmer, and it's quite noisy outside with all the different bugs and things going around. So let me know what you think. Do you prefer it indoor or recording outside, or either one is fine? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Now, the first thing is quite a few people had issues with the App Store this past week, with the App Store not installing updates or anything else, and Apple had a problem on the back end where they fixed that. After that, they updated the Apple Store app as well, which I installed here. I have a bunch of updates to do on this phone. But as we scroll down, let's get past the ones that are that need updates. You'll see there's a new update for the Apple Store. And if we open that up, the first time we open it, we get a new splash screen talking about always get the latest updates. Be notified about new products, special store events, recommendations on products you might like, and more. You can change this later in settings. And so there's new updates for settings for these particular things. So if you want to adjust your settings for the Apple Store, you can go into the Apple Store app and then go to your notifications, and then you'll have even more notifications for Apple Store notifications at the bottom, and then you can change it. And it just gave me an error for some reason, but you have order status, session notifications, and announcements and offers. So these are some settings that they're just letting you know about. So that's new. Also, quite a few people had issues with Snapchat this week, and Snapchat had a problem. It was actually an outage, and the reason I mention it is a ton of people mentioned to me or messaged me saying that there was a problem, Apple needs to fix it, but it turned out to be a problem with Snapchat. So they updated their app as well, and they fixed some issues they were having. Now, also, people have been messaging me about YouTube Picture-in-Picture. This is still rolling out to users, premium users in the US. Sometimes it works on different beta versions, such as Beta 3, and then doesn't work on Beta 4. It's really kind of a mess and is not rolled out to everyone. Sometimes the option is there, sometimes it disappears, and it just depends on the user. And some people are lucky that it's working and others aren't. So for some reason, it just seems to be there, and for others it's not. Now, this video is going to be split up a little bit differently than I did before. I'm going to split it into 14.7.1 and then 15 Beta 4, and you'll see all the time codes in the description, or you'll probably see them along the different players, so you can scrub to whatever you'd like to see, because there's a lot to talk about. Now, on iOS 14.7.1, I've got it on this iPhone 12 Pro Max, and I also have two different wallpapers, which I'll link in the description, but you can see there's two different ones. I thought it'd help differentiate it, and I couldn't decide between either one of them. But the first thing is, most people report iOS 14.7.1 is very stable. They're saying it's stable and fluid. Most people are having a great experience. That doesn't mean everyone, but most people are saying that scrolling, whether that be an old device, a new device, it doesn't really matter. It seems to be much more refined and stable without problems without problems crashing or anything else. That seems to make sense. We're on the last versions of iOS 14, most likely, or very close to it if Apple doesn't release another version, and it just seems to be pretty good overall for most people. That doesn't mean there aren't other issues in it, but one good thing is it doesn't get warm. Most people are saying that the issues with it heating up, maybe when you're even not using it, has gone away with 14.7.1. The majority of people say there aren't really many issues, and most people say there's really good battery life. Now, there are some bad things about it as well, and I'll talk about that. Then we'll look at battery life, but some people are saying that widgets just don't show up properly. Sometimes they'll be blank, you have to scroll back and forth, and then they show up. This has been a problem since the introduction of widgets, and I've seen this myself on not only the public releases, but also the beta releases, where the widget just doesn't show up, it's blank, sometimes you have to reboot, sometimes it's fixed just by scrolling back and forth. But for now, it seems to be working for me, but sometimes it's hit or miss. Also, some people are having issues with apps not even opening. So maybe you try and open an application, whether that be the camera or it could be weather or something else. Some people are having issues with it just opening in general. That's very few and far between, but some people have that. Also, some people say when they're replying to messages, it's very slow sometimes, or it can stutter. So I've seen that. And the number one thing I think I've seen people complain about is CarPlay. So CarPlay is still not working great for some. This seems to be dependent on the car, whether that be Honda or Toyota or Mercedes. It just is a different experience between all of the different cars for some reason. Some of that has to do with the manufacturer of the vehicle. Some of it has to do with the phone itself, but it seems to be still pretty buggy for some. Now, also, Bluetooth continues to be an issue not only on iOS 14.7.1, but also iOS 15 Beta 4. Bluetooth seems to be an issue with disconnects and sometimes even with Apple Music, even though they supposedly fixed this issue when using Apple Music, where you were using lossless audio or maybe Dolby Atmos. Sometimes it will just stop after 15 seconds, or your AirPods will just disconnect in general. So there's still some issues with that, and why all of a sudden in the early releases of iOS 14 Bluetooth became a problem is really hard to say, because this has been an ongoing issue that Apple really needs to resolve. Most people don't have an issue with it, but there are still quite a few complaints, not only on this version, but also iOS 15 Beta 4. Now, as far as overall battery life, using this full time, I got some screenshots sent in by Cameron. So again, thank you for these. And he's using a 12 Pro Max, so I thought it was relevant to this device, but this gives you a general idea. And I did have some others send them to me for iOS or iPhone 12 Pro that were having good battery life as well. And most people say that battery life on iOS 14.7.1 is quite good. So you can see he had yesterday 6 hours and 11 minutes of screen on time, a 1 hour and 56 minutes of screen off time, and he used almost 80% of his battery. So 75 to 80%. That means if he used another quarter of his battery, he would bump that over 8 hours of screen on time. This seems to be pretty consistent if you look through the different days. Again, the next day, 5 hours and 57 minutes of screen on time, 13 hours and 9 minutes of screen off time, and that's usually when you're playing music or doing something in the background. And then finally, a few days ago, similarly, 5 hours and 24 minutes of screen on time, 2 hours and 16 minutes of screen off time. And at that point, he only used about 70% of his battery life. So again, expect about 8 to 10 hours of screen on time. That's what you would get with this when it was pretty new. Sometimes up to 12 hours. It just depends what apps you're using and how heavily you're using it. But it seems to be pretty good overall. Now, as far as the good and bad about iOS 15 Beta 4, I've been using that full time on my iPhone 12 Pro Max. I also have it on the iPhone 11. And the good things about it are performance for most people. Not everyone, but many saw performance where it was halved before in things like Geekbench improve in this version where it was no longer a problem. My Geekbench scores seem to be pretty solid. I've talked about them before, but if we go into the history, take a look at the CPU benchmarks and find the most recent benchmarks here, you'll see they're right up there where they were when they were new. They're actually higher than previous betas. Some people were seeing these numbers put in half or split in half, and it seems to be fixed for most people this time around. Now, some people are having luck with banking apps working. Some are, some aren't. I've seen people in England say many banks are working there. But again, the apps need to be updated as well. This seems to happen year over year where the apps just sometimes won't work. So if you have a banking app that's critical, the betas may not be for you if you haven't installed them already. Now, as far as other issues in iOS 15 Beta 4, there's quite a few of them. If we go into photos, one issue is visual lookup. Sometimes people are just not seeing anything pop up as far as visual lookup, and if it does, it's blank. So you'll see it says it recognizes nature here on this photo. We tap on it, it says no content found. So it should be finding something. It recognizes that it's a flower and it's not working. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I showed this in a different video. This one works. So if I tap on this one, it should give me some results as to what the flower is. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's working with animals for me now, as well as landmarks, but not all of them. So there's still some work that needs to be done with this. Also, quite a few people have said that when you're in photos and it says select at the top, the text is wrapping around. Now, I haven't been able to reproduce this. I don't know if it's on a smaller phone, but on the iPhone 11 and 12 Pro Max, it's not happening. So if I go into Photos, and within Photos, you can see Select at the top. For some people, this is wrapping text and sort of the icon is larger than it should be. So when you tap on Select or Cancel, it just doesn't show up properly. Again, it's not happening on the iPhone 11 or the 12 Pro Max, but it is happening for quite a few people. So there's weird issues throughout. Also, some people are reporting crashes and resprings still. So apps are crashing, or the phone is just respringing where it goes black and then has the little dial in the middle and then reboots to the home screen. So that seems to be an issue. Now, I've actually seen a crash when I go into settings and then I go down to privacy, then location services, go all the way down to the bottom to system services, and then again at the bottom, go to significant locations. Now, I showed this in another video, and it's working for me now for some reason on the 12 Pro Max, but it's not working on the iPhone 11. So I can show you that on both. So if I go to the same place on both, again, privacy, location services, go to the bottom, system services, and then significant locations, you'll see it crashed on the iPhone 11, and it brings us right back to the main settings page. On the iPhone 12 Pro Max, it's now working. Now, I cleared the history, but you can see now it's working for me, and it looks a little bit different than it did before with earlier betas, but for some reason it's crashing regularly for me on different devices. So some are seeing that, some are not, but it's just kind of odd that this is happening fairly consistently on certain devices. Now, another thing is Spotlight search is still not working for everyone. Now, it seems to work okay for me. If I search for Apple, it seems to be okay. Everything's working, but some people still see it not working. Beta 4 fixed it for the majority of people, but Spotlight search isn't working for everyone, and that can be a big problem if you use this regularly. Also, certain third-party apps are still crashing, so Twitter crashes occasionally on me. For many people, I don't know if they need to update their app or it has to do with something with iOS, but there's definitely an issue from time to time there. And then also, storage isn't loading for some people as well. So if you go into your settings, go to General, and then iPhone Storage, for some people this just will never load. It just sits here for a very long time. It's worked for me earlier. It does take a little while, but it generally shows up. So I'll give it just a minute, see if it will load for me. Probably now that I'm recording the video, it may not show up properly, but we'll have to wait and see. So I'll give it a minute. Normally it's much faster than this, and let's try it on the iPhone 11 also. And you can see I don't need to try it as it just loaded there finally. So it does load for me. It takes a little bit longer than I would expect, but it is showing for me. And if I go all the way down to iOS, you'll see it's taking up 7.82 gigabytes, and system data is not taking up any for me, or it just needs to calculate still. So it is working, it seems okay, but it can be an issue for some people. Now, the iPhone is getting unusually warm for some people too with Beta 4. So this seems to be an issue for some people, not everyone, but a lot of people want to know, is it heating up? And I think it is getting hot for me sometimes as well, as my battery is not great. And I'll show you that in a moment. Also, I did want to bring up green tint, as green tint is still not fixed in this update. Some people say that it's got to be hardware. However, I think it's more software, and the only reason I say that is they fixed it on the 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max late in August, or mid to late August last year. So they could still fix it. If they never fix it by the time iOS 15 is out, well, then I'll definitely say it's more of a hardware issue. But it does seem to be happening to less people at least. So some of the updates in the recent versions with 14.7, 14.7.1 seem to fix most of those issues for people. And then finally, like I mentioned before, Bluetooth is an issue for quite a few people. Now, it hasn't been an issue for me most of the time. Once in a while, it won't connect to things like my car to unlock it, but most of the time it seems to be pretty solid and stable. So it works okay. If I connect it to my 12 Pro Max, let's see if it works. And of course, with all these phones on, sometimes it can confuse it, but it seems to be working okay, and it generally works like you would expect on this. So I haven't had too many issues with Bluetooth, but I know quite a few people have. Now let's go ahead and take a look at my battery life. We'll go to settings. Let's go back out here and go into battery. And then under battery, we'll go to battery health. And you'll see I'm at 97% battery health. Now, a lot of people keep saying these updates are draining my battery health, and they're simply rechecking. Every time it installs a new OS, it's going to say how much battery is still there. How much do I have of the capacity left? And then it just tells you based on a general calculation. This can fluctuate from time to time, and it seems to happen more like that on the iPhone 11, where it recalculates that battery over and over and over. So if we go to battery health on the 11, you'll see here, it's not recalculating now, but this is at 100%, and that's because I haven't used it full time. But using my 12 Pro Max every single day since it released, with the exception of testing out a few different phones for only a couple weeks, it's at 97%, charging it every night. Now, as far as battery life, it hasn't been great. So yesterday, I had 3 hours and 13 minutes of screen on time, 4 hours and 43 minutes of screen off time, and got about 80% usage. I noticed before I went to bed last night, it was unusually low, and normally it's around 50%. I was down below 20%, around 16% by the time I went to bed. I'm at 72% today, and it's even been on the charger in my car today. So it's not really good battery life, although this does say it's a little bit better. If we take a look a couple days ago, again, 2 hours and 5 minutes of screen on time, 4 hours and 24 minutes of screen off time, and I'm a little over 50% battery life. So it's just not great. 5 or 6 hours of screen on time is what I'm getting with this. Of course, it is a beta. Hopefully it will get better in the future. Now, as far as iPadOS, let's take a look at that. iPadOS 15 Beta 4 has been pretty good overall. It's been fairly stable. I haven't had any crashes or resprings. However, I am seeing issues with mail, where sometimes the mail just doesn't come in or sync properly between devices. Others are saying this not only with mail, but also reminders as well, and that's just in Beta 4 in general. So sometimes the iCloud data is not syncing properly. Most of the time it is, but mail seems to be the number one issue for me as far as that goes. Also, some people are saying Quick Notes is a little bit buggy. It's been okay for me. You'll see there's a weird bug right there where the keyboard popped up on the side, but it's been pretty good overall, but there's still some small things like I just showed you right here. So again, some really odd issues from time to time. Now the keyboard's in the right spot. So it just depends. But most of the time, it's really solid. I haven't had crashes or apps fail or anything on iPadOS, but again, I've had poor battery life on this as well. So if we go into battery life, we'll wait for it to load, and you'll see I charged it to 100% at 8:05 a.m. So it was charged this morning, and it's been used 50 minutes, and we're down to 84%. So this should get about 10 hours of screen on time, and we're not getting anywhere close. So the day before, an hour and 54 minutes of screen on time, 10 hours and 50 minutes of screen off time. And the odd thing is I don't use this off at all. So I never have the screen off playing music. So there's definitely some bugs. Some people are seeing odd things run in the background, like Sidecar, for example. I don't really use Sidecar that much. So it's causing battery drain for some. So there's definitely some optimization that Apple needs to do in the future with this. Now that leads me to, should you install iOS 14.7.1? And I would say if you're on the public versions, then absolutely, due to the security updates. People are saying it's stable, battery life is good in general, and the security updates fixed quite a few issues, and there were over 35 with iOS 14.7, and then 14.7.1 introduced another one. So I would definitely update to keep your phone secure, especially if you're using banking apps and things like that on it. Now, as far as iOS 15 Beta 4, if you're not already using iOS 15 betas, then I probably wouldn't install it. If you're on earlier betas, I would say that you should install it, as it's our job to sort of test these out and report feedback and figure out where the bugs are, and of course try out the new features and see what's going on, such as the changes to focus mode, things like that I've covered in other videos. So I would say definitely install it if you're on the betas, but if you're on a public version, I probably would wait until Beta 5 comes out, just based on some of the bad battery life it's had, especially if that matters most to you, and just general stability with certain apps. You want to make sure your apps work, and there isn't a specific list that says what works and what doesn't yet. So I would hold off. If you're really wanting to try it out, you could if you had an extra device, but of course that's up to you. However, if you do want to go back to 14.7.1, you would need a computer to do that. Now, as far as when to expect Beta 5, I think now we're going to be getting into the weekly releases. Now, generally every year when we switch from Beta 4 to Beta 5, once we get to August, we'll have weekly releases up till about Beta 7, and then we generally will have a release candidate and then a final version. So we could see it as soon as maybe next Tuesday on the 3rd, or it could be the following week. It just depends on what Apple decides this time around. But expect us to switch to a weekly schedule within August if they continue to do what they've always done. So I'm looking forward to Beta 5, of course, and to sort of see less and less features, but things become much more stable, battery life to improve, and more. Now, a few things before we take a look at the YouTube community poll in the comments. The iPhone 13 is just around the corner and correlates with that iOS 15 release. So expect that sometime in September. We're hearing more about this Apple event and the the Apple event is said to be virtual again this year, since Apple won't have people going back to work till about October at this point. So we should see that alongside with iPhone 13, with a release date usually in mid to late September. Now, also, iPhone 14 is said to be offering a titanium surface or a titanium frame. So right now we have aluminum or aluminium and also stainless steel for the Pro models. Expect a titanium version as well, similar to what we have with the watch. So this is a titanium Apple Watch edition. Expect a titanium surface offering, which is nice because it's lighter weight than steel, but also very durable. So that would be great to see in the future. Of course, we'll have other updates as well, hopefully some new MacBooks and more, but we'll have to wait and see. And also, it looks like we're going to have AirPods 3 released alongside the iPhone 13, according to many different leaks. So if that's true, we'll see them. If not, the AirPods Pro should be around for a while. I don't think we'll get AirPods Pro updates for a while, but it looks like AirPods 3 will have updates as soon as maybe September also. Now let's take a look at the YouTube community poll. So we'll go to the YouTube app, and on my channel under the YouTube community tab, you can see that I ran a poll the other day, and 26,000 people have voted at the time of this video, and 443 people have commented. 53% of you have already updated to iOS 14.7.1, so that's great to see. 27% of you are using iOS 15 Beta 4, and 13% of you are still on older versions of iOS, whether or not you're holding off for another reason or you just haven't updated yet. And then also 2% of you are using iOS 12 or older. So that's great to see. I'd love to know what phones you're using also. And then 6% of you are using Android. And so I appreciate everyone that voted, even if it wasn't relevant as far as Android. I figured I'd just add that since I had another poll option available. Now let's take a look at some of the comments. Pratham Japrakash, hopefully I'm saying that properly. I'm running iOS 15 Beta 4 on my iPhone SE first generation and iPadOS 15 Beta 4 on my iPad Air, and it is doing good, but I'm having issues with iOS 15 Beta 4 with battery life. It's not fine. I hope they fix it with the next beta, and iPadOS 15 Safari crashes when I do multitasking. JP says iOS 14.7.1 on iPhone 12 Pro. Battery life is as good as iOS 14 original release. Much prefer the battery life on iOS 13 with my older iPhone 10. These new iOS are all battery hoggy. Ashraf says, hi, I'm using iPhone 8 and I've already updated to iOS 14.7.1. It's been working good, no problem at this time, but battery backup still not well. Jacob says, I have one issue with 14.7.1. When I receive phone calls, sometimes it goes to my Apple Watch and I can't answer it on my iPhone 12 Pro. Alpha Bravo says, iOS 15 Beta 4 on iPhone 7. Battery life isn't great, but then my phone is old. Runs smooth, still struggling with banking apps. Actually, quite a few apps don't work yet. iPhone SE first gen, iOS 15 Beta 4, stable, no heat issues, and battery drain. Very smooth, no problems. Edifying Art says, running iOS 14.7.1 on iPhone XR, running smoother than ever, and battery life is great for a 2-year-old phone. Also great on my iPad 11 first gen. Makul Singh says, hopefully I'm saying that properly, iOS 14.7.1 increases performance on my iPhone SE2. In 14.6 and 14.7, it's running very slow. In this update, I feel my phone is running faster now compared to old versions of iOS. Z says, iOS 15 Beta 4 has been good for me so far. I'm hoping they add back the volume option back to Apple Maps. Sing the Gamer says, I have iPhone 6s with running iOS 14.7. Everything is working fine, but battery life downgrades sometimes. It consumes much battery. And then finally, I'm on iOS 15 Beta 2. There's not a choice, LOL. You definitely should update. As a beta tester, definitely update. And thanks for commenting. Everyone who commented, I really appreciate it, as I think it's super helpful to get a general idea of how it's going for everyone. And then finally, let me read one more. iPadOS 14.7.1 is great. It has an average battery life, and it is charging my iPad quite fast, waiting for iOS 14.8 betas. And so that's everything with iOS 14.7.1 and iOS 15 Beta 4. Now, I'm not sure we'll actually see an iOS 14.8. It's very possible, but with only a few weeks left until we see the final version of iOS 15, that would give us just a few weeks for a few small betas. So maybe we'll see an iOS 14.7.2 if they need to fix any issues, but we're looking more towards iOS 15 at this point, where they generally fix all of those issues and add all of the features that are in iOS 15. So I'm looking forward to that. Of course, this coming week, hopefully we'll see beta 5. But if you found anything else or would love to mention anything I haven't in the video already, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on both of these wallpapers, I'll link them in the description, like I said before. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.